Good morning, everyone. We're convening the Committee on Pandemic and Disaster Preparedness for our 10 a.m. agenda. Before we begin, I just wanted to start off going over some housekeeping. So because the morning hearings must adjourn prior to the noon floor session, not all testifiers may have the opportunity to testify. In that event, please know that your written testimony will be considered by the committee. Please keep yourself muted and your video off while waiting to testify and after your testimony is complete. The Zoom chat function will allow you to chat with the technical staff only. Please use that chat only for technical issues. If you are disconnected unexpectedly, you may attempt to rejoin the meeting. If disconnected while presenting the testimony, you may be allowed to continue if time permits. Please note, the House is not responsible for any bad internet connections on the testifier's end. In the event of a network failure, it may be necessary to reschedule the hearing or schedule a meeting for decision-making. In that case, an appropriate notice will be posted. Please avoid using any trademarked or copyrighted images. Please refrain from profanity or uncivil behavior. Such behavior may be grounds for removal from the hearing without the ability to rejoin. So now that we got that out of the way, we're gonna start off with HB 1415. First, we have Hawaii Department of Defense.
Good morning. My name is Kevin Baggs. I'm the Executive Director of the Hawaii State Fusion Center, and I'm here on behalf of the State of Hawaii Department of Defense. And in regards to House Bill 1415, we stand on our written testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Department of Education.
Aloha, Chair Ichiyama, Vice Chair Eli, thank you very much for your time. We stand on our testimony. Appreciate your time. We're here for questions should you have any. Aloha.
Aloha. Okay, we have Department of Budget and Finance that submitted comments. We also have Honolulu Police Department. Is anyone from Honolulu Police Department on? Okay. All right, so we'll just move on. Oh, members, any questions?
Yes, Vice Chair. For Randy Tanaka from DOE.
Yes, Chair.
Good morning, Mr. Tanaka.
Morning.
Thank you for being here today. The Department of Education was asking for a couple of amendments to this bill. I believe that you're asking to put in threat classification levels, low, medium, and high. And you also wanted to put in, I guess would be standards for disqualifying certain members from participating in the threat assessment team. I'm just wondering if maybe this could be done, or it might be more appropriate to be done in whatever policies and procedures the DOE comes up with. Would you be amenable to that versus putting it into the statute itself?
Yes, we would. So you should know that we work quite closely, or my Chief of Security works quite closely with the other agencies. And yes, we could do what you're requesting.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Aloha.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, we will move on to HB 1571. First, we have the Attorney General's office.
Good morning, Chair Ichiyama, Vice Chair, members of the committee. We just wanted to basically offer the comments that we submitted in writing, and I'll stand ready to answer any questions should the committee have them. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you. We also have Hawaii Primary Care Association that submitted testimony. Let's go down to Michelle Melendez. Are you on? Is that Michelle? Okay. we will go on to Lily Godfrey.
I'm here, 1 second. Hi, okay. So everyone seems to be confused about what science is these days. So what is science? It is a method of identifying truthful information that is observable and provable and nothing else. There is a scientific method for identifying and isolating disease-causing pathogens called Coe's postulates. They are: 1, the microorganism must be identified in all individuals affected by the disease, but not in healthy individuals. It can be isolated from the diseased individual. This is the second postulate. It can be isolated from the diseased individual and grown in pure culture. 3, when introduced into a healthy individual, the cultured microorganism should cause disease. 4, it must then be re-isolated from the diseased experimental host and found to be identical to the original microorganism. Things like bacteria and parasites can be isolated, for example. Scientists have sent in freedom of information requests to obtain the isolated COVID-19 virus, only to find out that it has never been isolated. In fact, no virus ever has been. Virologists do not use the postulates when isolating the virus. Their method is unscientific. Therefore, what a virus is and does, according to conventional medicine, is just a theory that has been disproven by other scientists who are being censored because the so-called experts don't have a rebuttal to this information. All they can do is hide and censor the truth because it goes against the giant manufactured global lie. It can be hard to believe how there could be this much deception. It becomes easier to understand with the realization that depopulation masquerading as a public health emergency is very important to the sociopaths and psychopaths in charge of our society. I'm not necessarily calling all of you sociopaths and psychopaths, but your bosses' bosses most likely are. The same people that are running everything like Bill Gates and company were also hanging out with a known monster called Jeffrey Epstein, who was involved in underage child sex slavery. So now all of a sudden, I'm supposed to believe that Jeffrey Epstein's friends care about my health, but they're not telling me to eat healthy or exercise or anything like that. The only solution seems to be taking a pharmaceutical product made by criminal felon companies who have falsified science, committed fraud, abused people, and paid out billions in lawsuits. What is the disconnect that makes us trust these people who clearly have no moral compass? All of this information is sourced and available in books and online. Research takes time, but as public servants, you should care about the truth and take the time, not just be following orders and receiving paychecks. I would like to see you all writing bills calling for the end to all of this nonsense and not more of it. Thank you.
Mahalo, Lily. We also have a number of testimonies that were submitted, written testimony, but that's all the testimony that we have for 1571. Do any of the members have questions? Okay, so we will move on to HB 1585. First, we have Haima.
Chair, Vice Chair, good morning. My name is Luke Myers. I'm Administrator of the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. We stand on our written testimony offering comments on H Bill 1585, available for discussion. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have HGEA.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Michelle Kurihara-Klein on behalf of Randy Pereira, our Executive Director, and our members at the Hawaii Government Employees Association would be happy to stand on our written testimony that you have before you and be available to answer any questions that you or the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Common Cause Hawaii with comment, State of Hawaii Organization of Police Officers, and Grassroots Institute of Hawaii, and an individual that submitted written testimony. Are there any questions from the members? No? Okay, we will move on to HB 1586. First, we have Haima.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. We stand in offering comments in line with our written testimony for House Bill 1586 and are available for discussion necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Department of Education.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair. I'm Brian Hallett, the DOE Assistant Superintendent for Fiscal Services. Here on behalf of Interim Superintendent Keith Hayashi, we stand on our testimony with comments and will be available if there are any questions. Thank you.
Mahalo. Do we have any questions? But that's all for our testimony. Do we have any questions from the members? Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Question for Luke Myers with HIEMA.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Administrator Myers. Thank you for being here. I just wanted to get a little bit of clarification on your testimony. The last paragraph that you were referencing the additional reporting requirements regarding federal funds. I just wanted to better understand whether or not you would be able to provide the information that's being requested in this bill, or if you're saying that you're not able to provide the information. If you could help me understand that a little bit better, please.
Yes, ma'am. We have a number of reporting requirements between our federal family and state emergency management when we have a declared disaster. Potentially, we get disaster funds. Sometimes the disaster funds do take a while to be initiated. Case in point, our December Kona Low event from 2021, we're still waiting for a presidential disaster declaration for that from the federal government, but we have gotten small SBA disaster loans. So in that situation, we already have some federal funds coming in, which may make these reporting requirements a bit challenging in the first 30 days. So we'd be able to provide a report, but we do think the 30-day window is a bit narrow focused with some of the timelines with our federal funds coming in.
And what about the annual reporting requirement? Is that something that will be possible?
The annual reporting requirement is possible. Right now, we have 12 open federally declared disasters plus our small business disasters. And so the report would grow each year depending on the disasters that are added. We also do quarterly reports and closeout reports with the federal government too. So we may be able to provide a summary of that information to the ledge on an annual basis.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you. And we will move on to HB 1587. We have HIEMA again.
Chair, Vice Chair, my name is Luke Myers, the Administrator of the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. We stand on a written testimony in support of H Bill 1587, available for discussion as necessary. Thank you.
Mahalo. That's all the testimony we have for 1587. Are there any questions? No. Okay. We will move on to HB 158.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Was that HIEMA that was up there?
Yes.
Question, HIEMA, what, my point is, why hasn't this been done? Or you need this bill because you haven't done it, you want to do it? What's the chronology of your need?
Yes, sir. Good morning. Is that Rep Ward? I'm sorry, I couldn't see a face or a name.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Yes, it's Representative Ward.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, that's me.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so we currently, we have an agreement, an emergency management assistance compact with our fellow states and the U.S. territories that allows mutual aid and resources to be shared. That is codified under HRS. This agreement would allow us to create a similar type of process to share resources between our counties. We've seen several large disasters since 2018 where our county partners have been independently impacted. And this will allow a mechanism and a vehicle in place to exchange resources and potentially get federal reimbursement more efficient and effectively as we respond and recover from an incident. So currently, we do not have this process built into 127, sir.
So you have not done it before then?
That is correct. I've only been with the state for 3.5 years, and it is currently not codified under 127.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions from members? No? Okay, thank you. We're gonna move on to HB 1588. First, we have Haima.
Chair, Vice Chair, good morning. My name is Luke Myers, the Administrator of the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. We stand on a written testimony in support of H Bill 1588 and are available for discussion as necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a number of written pieces of testimony that was submitted. But is there any questions from our members on this bill? No, we'll move on to HB 1736. First up, we have Haima.
Chair, Vice Chair, good morning. Luke Myers, the Administrator of the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. We stand on our written testimony offering comments on HB 1736. Available for discussion necessary. Thank you.
Mahalo. Next, we have Hawaii State Department of Education.
Good morning, Chair Chiyama, Vice Chair Eli, and members of the committee. Sean Bacon, Interim Assistant Superintendent of the Office of Talent Management, testifying on behalf of Superintendent Hayashi and the Department of Education. The department stands on its written testimony in support of House Bill 1736 and is available to answer any questions. Mahalo for your opportunity to testify.
Mahalo. Next, we have ERS.
Yes, good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. This is Tom Williams, the Executive Director of the Employees Retirement System. We offer to stand on our written testimony, and I am available to answer questions.
Mahalo. Next, we have HSTA.
Laverne Moore speaking on behalf of our president, also Tue Jr. We support this legislation for it temporarily allows retired teachers to come back and teach during this COVID-19 situation. Thank you.
Mahalo. Here we do have one written piece of testimony that was also submitted. Our members, are there any questions? Representative Ward.
Laverne Moore, please. The most experienced teacher that we have in the state of Hawaii who did DOE for at least 50 years or at least four to five decades.
How about
Laverne,
53 years?
53, oh, sorry, I was short 3 years. You must know the numbers then. How many people are in need of, if we pass this, would take advantage of it? In other words, how short are we that this thing has got to be put into gear?
I can say presently, I'm still teaching at McKinley High School. I would say at least 800 teachers positions a day. We have been subbing for one another. We've had security guards come in and sub in the classroom. It is critical because teachers are catching COVID, their families are catching COVID. It is critical and we need help in the schools. So if I was to retire today and my teachers at McKinley needed me, I would come in on their behalf. And this is only temporarily. And at least you're getting certified teachers coming back. And many of our teachers would support their fellow teachers and come back. So this,
and how many of the retired teachers would say, yay, I want to come back?
Well, I wouldn't know, but I do know personally when teachers say they're not coming back, but when their personal friends from their school ask them, they said, okay, I'll come in for you.
Okay, thank you, Laverne. 54 years, sorry, I missed it by 4. I have a question for ERS, Mr. Williams. Tom.
Yes, Representative Ward.
Tom, it says in your testimony that you're not really sure how this legislation impacts the guys who have retired, most of which probably, according to Laverne, would have already collected their retirement. Is there a work around this, or are you going to say, oh, you got to suspend their retirement benefits, or is there a limit on which they can make, like Social Security, et cetera, or we're just in an unknown territory?
Representative Ward, we're in unknown territory. The IRS generally prohibits what they refer to as in-service distributions. And what that means is that when individuals, for example, terminate their employee 1 month and immediately are rehired, it's viewed to be a get around the regulations that don't allow you to receive both pay and retirement benefits while you're working. So there are some constraints as to how long a person has to be separated before they can come back under IRS guidelines. However, there is some belief that that might be suspended during a period of emergency or in difficult to hire positions. We've not had an opportunity as yet for our board to see this, nor to talk with tax counsel. So our only reservation is to have those bases covered before, in fact, we finalize our testimony. We understand the value of creating or expanding the resource of teachers who are eligible to return, but we don't want an unintended consequence of some adverse impact on our tax qualification. And for that, this is new territory.
So should we pass it and find out what's in it, or wait till you've got something definitive? We've got a couple of months yet while we're in session.
We wouldn't want it to be passed. We wouldn't want it to be passed or absent our ability to amend our testimony, but we don't have any strong objection at this point.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Thank you, Chair.
Mahalo. Any other questions from members? Okay, we will move on to HB 1834. First, we have Attorney General's Office.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Deputy Attorney General Kevin Richardson providing comments on behalf of the Department of the Attorney General. As stated in HB 1834, the purpose of this act is to appropriate federal ESSER funding received by the Hawaii Department of Education to establish and administer the Strong Students Grant Pilot Program. And in reviewing guidance from the U.S. Department of Education, we determined that appropriating ESSER funds to implement this program likely conflicts with federal requirements regarding the discretionary authority of state and local educational agencies to determine how ESSER funds may be spent, and that appropriating these monies would potentially put those funds in jeopardy. Therefore, the Department of the Attorney General respectfully asks this committee to hold this bill or to amend it to appropriate funds from a source other than ESSER funds. Thank you, and I am available for any further questions.
Mahalo. Next, we have Department of Education.
Good morning, Chair Ichiyama and Vice Chair Eli and members of the committee. I'm Terry Ushijima, the Interim Assistant Superintendent with the Department of Education, testifying on behalf of Interim Superintendent Keith Hayashi and the Department of Education. We stand on our written testimony and respectfully offer comments on HB 1834 to establish and administer a Strong Students Grant Pilot Program. We are available for questions. Thank you for this opportunity to provide comments.
Mahalo. Next, we have the Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. The Chamber of Commerce Hawaii stands on their written testimony, and happy to answer any questions.
Mahalo. Next, we have Hawaii Kids Can.
Aloha, can you folks hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. We strongly support this bill. The COVID-19 pandemic has been incredibly challenging for schools and educators, but also parents and families. Hawaii schools are among the slowest to fully reopen across the country, and parents and guardians have had to step in as learning coaches. This has continued as a significant number of students are kept at home due to quarantine and isolation protocols. As students struggle with learning loss, Hawaii families need and deserve extra support, and federal funds have been provided to states to address learning loss. That's why we've been running a pilot on Lanai called Ohana Pods, where families have access to an educational supplies and supports portal through an online digital wallet. The process is simple and families get the help they need. We've included some testimonials from grateful families in our written testimony. While we got this done with small, local, and national grants, we know the impact could be huge if this model were supported by the legislature and state. Hawaii would not be reinventing the wheel, as states like Oklahoma, Nebraska, and North Carolina have already made significant investments in similar programs using federal funds. The DOE can and should make this happen, potentially even at the complex area level. This is a time for finding solutions. Any bit of relief would be a big deal to families. Let's do what we can to help our friends, family, and neighbors. Thank you so much.
Mahalo. We also have had other testimonies given, or written testimony, but that's all that we have for live testimony. Members, any questions?
A quick question.
The last testifier, sorry, I didn't get your name. The gentleman who just testified.
Miyashiro.
Mr. Miyashiro. Question. How are the other states doing in terms of defining what is a strong student and then what is the amount of money that, quote, the family would be given, or what you imagine this bill would suggest?
Thank you for the great question. From what I've seen, states typically provide kind of a certain income cap tiering to make sure that those families who are most in need can get the supports. And what I've seen, and I don't know what the average is across all of the states, but typically it seems like $1,000 or so is what has the highest impact for families, especially for these challenging economic times.
Are you saying the grant would be $1,000, or is that $1,000 per month or per semester, or what?
Again, what I've seen, it's a one-time installment that goes through an online portal. And so as we've done with our pilot, families get those set of funds up front, and then they're able to use what's in the portal to spend those funds.
And how are you defining strong student, or how did they define it and measure it?
In the case of our pilots, we didn't have an income cap. I believe in the bill there are a couple of tiers set up where it's I think family income of 50,000 and below, and then 75,000 on a first come first served basis. And I think that's similar to what other states have done.
That's the strong family, but it says strong students. Is it, in other words, is there a GPA implied by this?
No. Yeah, and I think one piece that's really important from my perspective is this is really looking at the family and students together as a unit. And I think that goes to what I was sharing in my testimony is families have certainly had to step in a lot more over the last couple of years and continue to do so to help their kids keep learning.
There's an inverse correlation between GPA and family income. And if this is going to subsidize F and D students, I'm not sure it's going to do what you're intending it to do. Anyway, it looks like it's experimental. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Chair?
Question for Mr. Miyashiro. Sorry.
No problem.
Thanks for being here this morning. I don't know if you had a chance to hear the testimony from the Department of the Attorney General and the DOE expressing concerns about the fact that the bill appropriates ESSER funds. And I didn't know if in drafting the bill, there was a reason why you chose ESSER funds, or if it would be okay to do a general fund appropriation. What are your thoughts?
Thanks for the question. There is a bill in the Senate, and let me pull up the number, but it's a similar program, but it's using general funds as an option, primarily for that reason. But I did want to point out, while there may be some technical challenges with requiring the department to take this route, the department could, on its own, absolutely use some of its federal funds for this purpose. And particularly, as I pointed out in the testimony, there are these complex area plans, and any one of those complex areas could take this up.
Thank you, Mr. Miyashiro. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Can I follow up on that?
I think Representative McCovey, did you have a question?
I have a question if you got a chance, Chair.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Yes, for David. Thanks for being here and everything. Did you approach the Board of Education about this insofar as getting their support and having them make available programmatic funding for your initiative at all? And
yes, so we've certainly shared this program with the board. They didn't commit one way or the other to actually driving for this program. But again, we did emphasize it's very much under the purview of the board, and the federal funds use it for these kinds of purposes, especially as it relates to addressing learning loss, which is a significant issue right now.
Okay, I understand. I know there's clearly concern with the federal funds being tapped as the funding source, but also you're a nonprofit, right? Entity?
Correct.
Okay, have you ever had a discussion about using a grant in aid as a way to fund this program? Because that's usually the way the legislature does fund nonprofit activities that are outside of the scope of state government funding.
That's a great point. And I did want to emphasize, I think the goal is we are looking for something that potentially could be sustainable and not necessarily something that we would be operating ourselves as part of a GIA, but really looking at the state and the department as a potential venue for having something like this, which again, if it's something that works really well and families want to continue, I think it would be a strong argument to consider it past pandemic times.
Yeah, no, I mean, GIA is a good way to continue the program, prove it, and then hopefully get that programmatic support at the board level using funds that, wouldn't jeopardize other funding, general funds as the Senate has done. Okay, David, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Rep. And I did want to clarify the Senate bill that they uses a slightly different approach in terms of funding is SB 2816. I know there's so many numbers floating around for everybody right now. And so I just wanted to clarify that for you folks.
Is there any other questions from members?
I have a follow-up question. Sure. David, again, what's the nexus between the grant to the family other than they're being poor? I'm trying to see the structure of the incentives here.
Thanks, Rep. So the nexus for the families, they're not required to demonstrate, anything that, as you mentioned before about GPA, but in our experience with our pilot, we found that families have been able to use the funds for things like tutoring service, like additional supplemental learning supplies at home, learning kits, things like that. And so I think for many families, especially those who have been hit hard and already had a pretty tight budget at home, being able to go and pay for, Kumon services when you're making less than $50,000 as a family or even 75, I think that is, quite prohibitive. And so for something like this, it opens up those kinds of opportunities for families to get the supports that, maybe some of their more middle or high income peers can cover out of their own pocket. And so in my mind, that's really the nexus, which is who are those families that would really benefit and really deserve the additional support, knowing that this has been an extremely, extremely challenging time for students.
That sounds very encouraging, but is it prescribed, necessary, and mandatory in the bill that they do spend it and it will be followed up as a legitimate expenditure? Or you're just finding that some people do that and some may not do that?
So again, I don't want to, require any particular vendor, but in our pilot, there are programs set up like Class Wallet, which has a digital wallet program where it's all education supplies and vendors within the program. And so folks cannot spend it on anything that's not pre-approved. And so, again, if folks want to use it for tutoring services, that provider can sign up to be part of the program. If they want to use it for supplies and learning needs, they can also purchase it directly through the program and get it shipped to their home. So I think that's what's great is, we're facing some really challenging times as a community and especially for families. And there are some technologies out there to help make things like this easier. So it's not as complicated as having to cut checks directly to families and needing bank account information, right? And then I think where we saw the other states administer much, much larger pots of funds using similar programs, they've really had no issues with fraud or anything that you might expect, especially if you're sending checks out directly to families. It's all self-contained within the digital walled garden.
Of course, in Hawaii, the high cost of living means that school supplies are not probably the first priority when rent and food and other things, gas, et cetera, is really sky high. The question when you said earlier, oh, these are pre-approved, who say yay or nay on the pre-approval?
So for the Class Wallet program, as we've used it, it already comes preloaded with a variety of educational vendors and programs. And so what I believe they've done with other states is the states, if they like those pre-approved programs, they can certainly keep them. If there are things that they want to modify about it, they have that flexibility as well. And so, in our experience, it's been a great platform, I think, primarily because it's got a lot of that information already in there and done. But again, if you want to have local vendors apply to be able to offer tutoring services, or other kind of supplemental educational needs, they can do that with the platform. And so again, that's just been our experience with ClassWallet. There may be other platforms out there that do it differently, but we've been very pleased with how easy it is to use the program.
Okay, if used correctly, it sounds like it's good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rep.
Mahalo. We are going to recess for decision making. So thank you. Meeting our 10 a.m. agenda for pandemic and disaster preparedness. And Cheryl will do decision making.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Great job this morning.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, members. First up, House Bill 1415 relating to threat assessment. This bill, we are going to defect the date July 1, 2050. Technical non-substantive amendments. On page 12, line 1, we wanted to add in that in addition to the agency, Department of Education and the Charter School Commission can also vet the threat assessment members as requested by DOE. And then the remainder of their requests, we ask that they can address it in policy versus putting it into statute. And then we're also on page 2, line 21, we're just gonna add on to the bottom of the purpose clause that the threat assessment team should also be working with state and county emergency management. Members, are there any questions? I'll turn to folks in the room. Any questions on Zoom? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Okay, we are voting on HB 1415 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Cullen.
Aye.
Representative McKelvey.
Aye.
Representative Mizuno.
Aye.
Representative Waldberger.
Aye.
Representative Woodson.
Aye.
Representative Yamashita.
Aye.
and Representative Ward. Recommendation is adopted. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, members. Moving next to House Bill 1571, related to COVID-19 vaccination status. We did receive a lot of testimony on this bill. The recommendation is to defect the date to July 1, 2050. Also, I think that this bill is so specific to the current pandemic. My recommendation is going to be that we add a sunset to this measure, June 30, 2023, and also that it will be put into session law rather than in codified in HRS. Finally, I'd like to note in the House Standing Committee report, the comments from the Department of the Attorney General as well as the Hawaii Primary Care Association. I think their comments are probably more appropriately addressed in the Judiciary Committee. So I'll be noting that for them. Members in the room, any questions? Members on Zoom, any questions? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair, House Rep. 1.
Thank you, Chair. Recommendations to pass HB 1571 with amendments. Are there any reservations? Any reservation? Representative Ward?
So further understanding.
Any no's? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. Next bill, House Bill 1585, relating to emergency management. Recommendation is to pass this out as a House Draft 1 with a effective date of July 1, 2050. Members in the room, any questions? Seeing none, members on the Zoom, any questions? Okay, Vice Chair, House Draft 1.
Thank you, Chair. Recommendation is to pass HB 1585 with amendments. Any reservations? Any no's? Chair, recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. Next, House Bill 1586, relating to disaster response. Recommendation is to pass the House Draft 1, effective date July 1, 2050, add technical non-substantive amendments. We're also going to add a blank general funded appropriation to Department of Defense for disaster response. I think that the concerns of the Department of Education about having a ready and available pot of money to respond to natural disasters is well taken. So that's why we're adding that appropriation. And then on page 6, line 1, we are going to change the date for the report from 30 days back to 60 days to allow HIEMA additional time. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair, House Draft 1.
Thank you, Chair. Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 1586 with amendments. Any reservations? Representative Ward? Any no's? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. Next, House Bill 1587, relating to an interstate mutual aid system. Recommendation is to pass the House Draft 1. Effective date July 1, 2050, technical amendments. And then on page 8, lines 7 through 8, it's just a small technical change. We're going to delete the reference to the committee and instead insert the agency, being the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair, House Draft 1.
Thank you, Chair. Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 1587 with amendments. Any reservations? Any no's? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. House Bill 1588. Recommendation is pass the House Draft 1, effecting the date to July 1, 2050, and technical non-substantive amendments. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair, House Draft 1.
Thank you, Chair. Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 1588 with amendments. Any reservations? Any no's? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. Next, House Bill 1736, relating to education. I think this is a very novel idea and certainly would help many schools that are feeling the strain of this recent COVID-19 surge. I would like to note in the committee report the concerns of the employment retirement system and that they still need to determine whether or not this measure would affect the tax exempt status of the ERS under the IRS code. But other than that, the recommendation is to pass the House Draft 1, effecting the date to July 1, 2050 with technical non-substantive amendments. Members
Chair,
of the
comment. I think this is very well worded and needed, even though IRS has a bit of a difficulty. I think it has to go through for the sake of the kids and getting teachers. When Laverne Moore said, we got security guards coming in and doing teaching, come on, give me a break. I mean, that's really extreme. So this should be revived, hopefully rather immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, Rep. Ward. That's why we're moving it on to further discussion. Members, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, House Draft 1.
Thank you, Chair. Chair's recommendations pass HB 1736 with amendments. Any reservations? Any no's? Chair recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Last measure on our agenda, House Bill 1834 relating to education. Not a lot of good discussion on this bill. Recommendation is to pass the House Draft 1, defecting the date July 1, 2050, technical non-substantive amendments. We're also going to change the appropriation from ESSER funds to general funds, noting the concerns of the Department of the AG. And in the standing committee report, we're going to add in that the requested amount is $5 million. And we'll let the Education Committee consider the appropriateness of whether or not this should continue to be general fund appropriation or ESSER funds. Members, any questions? Rep. Ward.
Chair?
Sure.
I'll go Rep. Ward and then Rep.
Okay,
McKelvey. Rep. Ward.
Chair, I still don't see the nexus between this being an educational bill other than a welfare subsidy bill, because there's nothing related to the student other than being the son or the daughter of the low-income family, which is important that they have it. But the fact that there's not anything that incentivizes the kid or the individual, and generally, as I said earlier, there's an inverse relationship between student achievement and income. And this as an income subsidy, and when he said, well, they have to buy educational and other kind of books, I'd like to see that in proof, because the needs of these poor families are not buying books and internet and other kinds of things. It's basic survival of rent, food, gas, etc. So I have some serious questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Rep. Ward. Rep. McKelvey.
Yes, thank you, Chair. First, thanks for the amendments on changing the method of funding. I had the same concerns the Department and the AG had. However, the fact that the Board of Education hasn't endorsed this or signed off on it, and that this, I think, as I said earlier, would be more appropriate for a grant in aid. I'm worried about the precedential value in moving a bill to do this instead of going that route. And again, given the separation of powers between the legislature and the Board of Education. So I look forward to the further discussion. I know it's getting 2 more committees. So just for right now, WR.
Thank you, Chair McKelvey. Members, any other comments, questions? Okay, seeing none. House Draft 1.
Thank you, Chair. Chair's recommendations pass HB 1834 with amendments. Representative McKelvey with reservations. Any other reservations? Representative Ward. Any others? Any no's? Chair recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much, members. This hearing is adjourned.